Good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'm Ray Lyon, and we have a very special guest with us this morning. This is our director, Dewey Thompson.
Hi, everybody.
And we have Brianna here. She is actually going to be behind the scenes this morning doing all of our technical things. As you know, that she's very good at doing that and giving Dewey a little bit of face time.
You all look like you were having so much fun doing these things, and I had to get in on the action. So, thanks for letting me come.
Absolutely. Just a little bit of background. Dewey's not only our director, so he's both Brianna and I's supervisor. Of course, I always call him boss. But Dewey and I worked together many, many, many years ago at our previous life, where I was actually his supervisor
Hmm.
for a hot minute. And I remember when I applied for this job, he was already here. And I remember thinking, oh gosh, I hope I was a good supervisor. And that's how he remembered me.
You were a great supervisor. I
Um,
learned a lot actually working for you. So it was a good time.
I hope it wasn't a lot of what not to do.
No, no, not at all. Examples of what to do is
Oh,
what it
okay.
was. Yeah,
All
yeah.
right. When I think about being a supervisor
Uh-huh.
and I think about um, what it takes,
Hmm.
and a lot of times we do learn from our last mistake.
Oh gosh, yes.
And so I want to kind of ask you, like,
Okay.
what was your biggest lesson when you first became a supervisor, if you can remember?
Yeah. Well, a couple things. Number one, I think I got into that role because I was good at the job.
Sure.
The technical job. I mean, I was waiting tables. I was bartending, and I made a lot of tips, and people kind of looked up to me in an informal role. And then I got into this role of supervision, and it's like, well, what made me a good waiter and bartender? Not necessarily the same things that make you a good supervisor.
Yeah.
I would probably say my biggest mistake was trying to become everybody's best buddy.
Mm,
I really didn't lay out some expectations of what I needed from staff. Instead, it was more about, oh, I want you to like me. I really want you to like me, kind of thing. Because I felt that if you liked me, you'd want to do things for me.
yeah.
But then I wondered why I got walked all over by my
Hmm.
staff all the time. So
Hmm.
that was probably my biggest mistake. What about yours?
I yes, I think that idea of boss versus buddy
Oh,
leads us to a whole host of other pitfalls
oh, sure.
that we fall into. I almost, when I think about it, almost from the other side, because I think a lot of times people get promoted for that very same reason.
Hmm.
They're very good at the job they're doing.
Hmm.
And so that makes people think, well, then they should manage that job,
Yeah.
right? Manage the people that are doing that job. And I
Right.
think you slide into two categories. You either then become the buddy
Uh-huh.
because you want to use that social influence,
Right.
right, to move people forward, or you're so insecure then managing the people, and but you're so comfortable doing the job
Hmm.
that those people are doing that you micromanage it.
Yes. Yes. And you become too much of the boss.
Yes.
And I also remember sometimes, I think it was my second supervisory job where I thought to myself, okay, as soon as I get this job, things are going to change around here,
Yeah.
right? It's going to be done the way I think it needs to be done, and then you move too much into that boss role and you wonder why everybody kind of rebels against you. So it's about, I think, balancing those two roles,
Yeah.
right? The boss, because you are responsible for getting the work done through other people. So there is a boss element to it, but you got to balance that with the relationship side
Sure.
of it. Yeah, yeah.
In I mean, we're 20 years
Long,
beyond
yeah,
all of
yeah,
that and
yeah.
all of the things that we've learned. um, I'm going to ask you guys, like, what has been your biggest lesson learned,
Mm.
or where are you right now in your supervisory journey? What are you struggling with? And send us some information, send us a chat thinking about what's going on, and we'll have Brianna keep up with that. And if things come up, she'll let us know if you've got questions or comments. We do have an upcoming supervisory series, so I want to mention that to you, and let you know this conversation will continue coming up in August. So be thinking about that. But, in other supervisory things, when I think about pitfalls,
Mhm.
um, relationships are really, really, really important.
Oh gosh, yes.
People first
Hmm.
is a lot of times what I say when I'm coaching managers,
Hmm.
to be better supervisors and better leaders. Take care of your people,
Hmm.
and then your people will just naturally take care of the work.
Right.
And so you don't have to be overly friendly, as in that buddy persona, and you don't have to be overly bossy in that idea of focusing too much on the work or their
Right.
production.
Right.
But you have to be good at giving feedback.
Yes, yes, you do. Feedback is kind of how people, I think, know your expectations,
Yeah.
right, as the supervisor. So guiding them through the feedback that you're giving them, whether it is recognizing a lot of the positive things. I really hope that people become one of those supervisors that walk around catching people doing the right
Yeah.
things, right? Because you can really help to motivate people by giving that positive reinforcement. Now, sometimes though, you have to give them maybe you should try this, or maybe you should think about a different approach,
Mhm.
and give them some of that feedback for improvement. But by not giving feedback,
Yeah.
one way or the other, essentially what you're saying as a supervisor is that what you're doing is perfectly fine,
Right.
right? And which could be if you've got some great employees. However, if you've got some employees that need a little bit of development, need a little bit of help, I think as a supervisor, that is your job, is getting the work done through other people. So it's really important, I think, to offer that feedback, and on a very regular basis.
Right.
Yeah.
Having those conversations and making them a regular part of your dialogue
Mm.
with your people is a great habit to get into.
Hmm.
So failure to give feedback is oftentimes a really big pitfall
Oh
of
yes.
supervisors. So I encourage people to just start having regular conversations, meeting with not just your team, early,
Yeah.
early in that promotion,
Uh-huh.
but ask a lot of questions, do a lot of listening at first,
Hmm.
finding out what went well with the other supervisor, what didn't go so well.
Hmm.
Don't ask for the tattletale, 10 things I hated about my last boss.
Yeah. Yeah.
But really, what worked and what didn't
Yeah.
work, and what do you need? What do you want in
Hmm.
a supervisor? And be ready to just listen.
Absolutely. Regularly scheduled meetings, I think, is
Yeah.
a really important thing as a new supervisor. Not only do you get to know your employees, but they know that that's the time, right? If they've got questions and you're not surprising them when you walk down the hallway and say, "Hey, I need to see you in my office," right?
Right.
Then they're
Right.
then they're freaking out,
Right.
right? But if you have regularly scheduled meetings, that's your time to get to know each
Yeah.
other. And I loved what you said, Ray, about listening, and really trying to understand who your employees are. By listening and asking questions and really getting to know them, you find out what motivates them. You find out, a lot about their perspectives. And then that allows you, as a supervisor, to be very versatile with all the different personalities that you
Yeah.
probably have on your staff.
Yeah. There's some questions that I always ask, and I know Brianna would be nodding her head and weighing in on this. And one is, how do you like to receive feedback?
Oh, good question.
And not just, oh, send it to me in an email kind of thing, but is it just give me direct feedback?
Hmm.
Or sometimes I need it couched a little differently. I need it,
Yeah.
given to me softly. Or so I like to ask that question.
Hmm.
How do you like to
Hmm.
receive feedback? How do you like to be recognized?
Another good question.
Because if I asked Dewey that, he would definitely say, "Oh, I got to parade Ray up and down the hall. Like she wants the crown, the scepter, she wants it public." But there are people too that are like, "You
Exactly.
know what? I just want you to walk into my office just one on one."
Hmm.
And to me, you have to do it that way because that's how, or whichever way they want, because that's how you honor them.
That's right.
And so asking, how do you like to receive feedback? How do you like to be recognized? And then two other things that I've most recently, when I say most recently, like within the last 5 years.
Okay.
As old as I am, that's recent. Is why do you stay?
Ah, good question.
Why do you still get up and come here every day? And I think that's something you can ask every so often because it might change
Hmm.
stage and age in people's lives.
Yeah, we want different things throughout our career at different stages throughout our career, right?
Yeah.
You know, I'm on the down slope
Both of
right
us,
here.
buddy.
Right?
All right.
I'm kind of on the down slope here, and so I stay for a couple reasons. Number one, I love what I do.
Yeah.
I love seeing an impact of what I'm able to do, and so by asking that question, you are able to find out what is meaningful about about this job for that particular employee. So yeah, those are some really, really good
Yeah.
questions.
You know, one more I would ask.
What?
What would have to happen that would make you leave?
Ooh, good one, good one. Things to avoid, right?
Yeah.
It's not necessarily what we just want, but maybe things we need to avoid as well
Yeah.
when we're working with our employees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, as you're transitioning into this idea of supervision, or maybe you're already there, but you haven't found these things out,
Hmm.
I think it's okay to ask,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So in your getting to know people and in your one-on-ones, I think you need to be asking these kinds of questions
Mhm.
and periodically check back in,
Oh yeah.
you
Because
know?
things can change, right? As you're working with people, that becomes somewhat difficult though. Because I think I've been in this situation. I know you probably have too, where you are now a supervisor of people that used to be your peers.
Yes.
And that can be a really tricky
Yep.
situation because you think about them as colleagues, as friends, and now
Yeah.
when you become that supervisor of them, you're kind of in a what I call a one-upsmanship type of relationship,
Yeah.
right? And that makes it difficult. And uh, what are your advice for folks on
Ugh. First of
that?
all, I feel you because
Right.
in some instances, maybe you and another person that you were peers with
Hmm.
both applied for the same job.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I know, if I shared names, I mean, that was a situation I was in at the bank.
Hmm.
Was two of us, we had been, at the same level. We were colleagues. We both applied for the same promotion.
Hmm.
I got it. She didn't. And now I was her boss. So I had to deal with that
Hmm.
situation. And then not long after that, it was annual review time.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so now I'm not only writing her review, but I'm also writing all of my other colleagues' reviews.
Hmm.
And I would encourage you as quickly as possible, go back to the person who, if they're still there,
Hmm.
go back to the person who was in that position and let them help you write those
Oh,
reviews.
absolutely.
And don't try to do it yourself
Hmm.
because I was lucky that my previous boss, our previous boss, was still within the organization. And I was lucky. However, I was not smart
Right.
because I didn't ask for that help.
Right. Hmm. I think when it gets to those kind of situations where you're supervising people that used to be your peers, I think a more self-awareness of building your credibility becomes really important. Um, you can't be this, it can't be the same type of relationship.
It's
It,
not.
it, it can't be. It just has to
It changes
change.
like
It
that.
changes like that overnight, whether you like it or not. And that means that you have to kind of be intentional about building that boss relationship, right?
Yes.
So really focusing on building your credibility, I think would be a really important thing in that situation.
Yeah, because it does change
Yeah,
overnight.
yeah.
So you could have been great colleagues, great peers. The phone call comes, you got the promotion. Instantly, you're no longer part of their network.
Hmm. Hmm.
Instantly.
That's right.
So you're out there all alone. You have been voted off the island. Seriously.
Yeah, you have.
And, probably for a month, I cried every night
Yeah.
because four of my best friends were now gone.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know,
But the relationship has to change.
it
It,
does.
it, it really does. But that's about building that credibility and earning their trust,
Right.
at the same time. But being very, very intentional about that, I think, is probably the key to that. One other thing I'd say about that is, as peers, we probably used to go to one another and vent our frustrations,
Right.
right? Did you hear what the boss did?
Yep.
Can you believe that they're doing this or making us do this, that kind of stuff? You can no longer do that,
Nope.
right?
Nope.
Your peers are now other supervisors. That's who you go to for your,
Right.
your support, right?
Right.
Either your boss or your other supervisors that are your peers at that point. You can no longer go to your subordinates
Right.
for that kind of support, I
Right.
guess. Yeah.
And just keep in mind, when you were complaining about your boss, you're now that person.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
be mindful. Guess who they're complaining about?
Yeah.
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 Yeah. I'm getting a nod from behind the curtains here. What's going on?
So we have somebody who has chimed in here. Dennis has asked. He says that he has a challenge managing employees that are older, more experienced than him, and has kind of watched him grow into this position. So, do you all have any idea, like suggestions or ideas for that?
Well, one thing
Yes.
I would do is I would honor that experience. I would kind of tap into those folks who have been there longer, honor their hard work, their dedication, their commitment over the years, and kind of tap into it. Maybe go to them and say, and be open and vulnerable yourself. What could I start doing differently? What can I stop doing differently, or stop doing, or continue to do?
Right.
And really kind of tap into that. What are your suggestions, Ray?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this person needs to be your ally.
Mm-hmm.
And so be very careful about making it a power struggle.
Yeah.
And your best thing to do is when that line has been drawn in the sand and now you're this person's boss, even though you might be 20 years younger than them, bring that person across the line with you.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you need to have, and this might happen in a series of conversations, don't think that it's going to be an event and then it's going to be over and you're going to be, on the same side of the line. This will probably take a series of conversations. But be very clear about in thinking about building that trust with this person and being authentic and vulnerable, like Dewey's talking about. Be very clear about what will happen and then make sure it does happen. So if you say, this is what I'm going to do, and you can count on it, make sure you do it.
Follow through.
Follow through. And so I need your help with this, and then let him or her help you with it.
Right.
And then get back.
Yeah.
Right? Don't try to overmanage that process. These are things I'm going to do, and then do them.
The other thing I would say about that is don't discount your own abilities,
Yeah.
right? They chose you for that position,
Right.
right? Over other folks that may have been there a little longer. So what unique skills and do you bring? You have to kind of remain confident about your abilities and about your skills. So just remember that, you were chosen for
Right.
this particular role. But I would invite them to come along with you, right? Yeah.
And again, don't power struggle over this. And when the conversation is over, it's over.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Sure.
Sure. So we're done, and I appreciate that information.
Yeah.
But don't let it come up over and over and over again.
Yeah. Yes, great question.
Yeah.
So send in some more
Yeah.
questions if you have it.
And that's happening a lot. I
It
mean,
is.
as our generations are turning over, where we have younger people
Mhm.
managing older people.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think another pitfall that I fell into was not necessarily describing expectations of my employees too well, right? I would think that, well, you've been here, you know what the job's about, you go out and do it, right? As opposed to setting very, very clear expectations for folks. I always, my daughter hates it when I talk about her, but when she was a lot younger, I thought, well, she could start doing a few chores around the house, right? And so I had it in my mind that she was going to put her clean laundry away. I did the laundry, I folded it, I put it upstairs on her bed, and I simply wanted her to take it from the bed and put it where it belongs. That was the expectation in my head. Here's what came out of my mouth. You got to get that stuff off your bed. And onto the floor it went, right? Very ambiguous
Right.
in terms of those particular type of expectations. So that's another pitfall I would think about to improve your employee's ability to get their work done is they got to know what specifically it is
Right.
that you're wanting from them, right?
I think that what is hard about that, I mean, it's easy to say, oh, set those expectations for your people, but just like in that situation, sometimes when we walk in, we don't know what expectations we have. Like
Mhm.
maybe we know so well the process of getting the job done because we just came from the job,
Right.
right? We were obviously said we were technical experts,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? That's why we got promoted. So we know so well how to do the job that we don't even know what those expectations are.
Hmm.
And so I think it's really good then when we're having these open and vulnerable conversations with our staff, our direct reports, that we really begin talking about that
Hmm.
so we know where those gaps are.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that we're probably pretty good at describing expectations of the work itself.
That's what just where I was going.
Here's
Oh.
the duties that you need, here's the work that you
Yep.
need to get accomplished. I don't feel, though, especially novice supervisors, um, that they don't do such a good job about describing other types of expectations.
Yep.
So, for example, how are we going to treat each other on
Yep.
this team? What are those interpersonal skills that are appropriate, that I want to see, and the things that I don't want to see in terms of how we're going to treat each other?
Right.
I think it's also important to kind of talk about initiative and when you want them to use their own minds
Yeah.
as opposed to coming to you every time they got a question. Because there's sometimes when I probably do need to be involved when they have questions, right? But not all the time. So what's appropriate there? I have expectations that they continuously improve, and you got to use your mind for that, right? I want them to have expectations that um, they do their research, they do their homework, right? As opposed to me just giving them things.
Mm-hmm.
So having expectations about some initiative, I think, would be helpful. Any other areas that you think are important?
Yeah, when I think about that, that's exactly where I was going, and I think that's why we work so well together.
Ding,
Like,
ding, ding, ding,
yeah,
ding,
we're
ding.
just this mind meld. But that's true.
Mhm.
When we think about relationships and we think about how our team operates and we
Mhm.
think about, um, not just the work, but we have to then uphold those expectations. We
Mhm.
can't we can't slide on that. So if we say that that's something that we expect, then we've got to be, as supervisors, we've got to be willing to back that up.
You have to be the example
Yes.
of the behavior that you expect of your followers.
Yeah.
Right. And I often hear this question, well, Dewey, I got this employee that's showing up late all the time, or, I got this employee that's kind of rude to the rest of the employees and that kind of stuff. And before you even think that it's this person, that it's all about them, I think the first person you ought to look at is yourself and say to yourself, what example have I set?
Mm-hmm.
Am I late to work every other day? Because essentially, if you are, that's an example, right, of the behavior that you're saying is okay for the rest of the employees.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be the example of the behavior that
Yeah.
you expect. Yeah.
Yeah. And I always, in coaching, as an
Mm-hmm.
outside, that's one of the services we provide is coaching, doing executive coaching. And so I always like to ask those managers, when they're talking about this employee that's stepping so outside the lines and things. And so I'm asking, well, what has this employee said when you had this conversation
Oh,
with
yeah.
them?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, well, I haven't.
Well, getting back to the feedback, right?
Exactly. Then I'm like, so, there's reasons why this
Mm-hmm.
manager hasn't. It's either that they don't know how,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
they don't know what to say, or that they don't want to. So then we role play or we talk about how we might do that so
Right.
that they can actually go execute that conversation.
Absolutely.
But that's the first thing I say. Oh gosh, what did they say? Because usually it's, I haven't had that.
Yeah.
I was like, well, that's probably where we need to start.
Yeah. I often get those questions. Dewey, I got this employee. What do we do? And
Yeah.
I'm like, there's not a simple solution to those questions, right? It's not a 1+1, boom, your problem solved.
Right.
It is really about conversations.
It starts there.
It starts there.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Do
Yeah.
they know they're late and that you if you let it go on, then they're like, oh, well, nobody told me I couldn't wear
Yeah.
pajamas
They
to
can't
work.
change behavior that
You
they're
know.
unaware of,
Right.
right?
Right.
If you haven't
Especially
brought
if
it to
you
their
let
attention.
it, yeah, there's some sense that it's okay if they've done the behavior and you didn't call attention to it. So then they're going to do it again. Nobody said anything. Now you got 2 people doing the behavior and nobody's getting it. Now you got 5 people. It grows,
It does.
right?
It does.
And
It
it
does.
gains momentum. And then that's where we get the word dynamics,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
It gains momentum. And now we've got team dynamics.
And you got a norm.
Yep.
You've set a norm
And
then
it's
at that
grown
moment.
into this wildly ugly beast,
Mhm.
and it gets out of control.
It really can very, very quickly.
Yeah.
I guess what I would say is that an employee's poor performance or their poor choices of behavior should never be a surprise to them. They should never be surprised about what they think the boss thinks about that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And the easiest way to talk about it is objectively.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
identify, and I was just having this conversation with my daughter the other day. How do you approach somebody?
Mhm.
Because she deals with so many people in her job. She works for a huge organization. How should she approach somebody? I said behaviorally. What behavior did that person do
Mhm.
that makes you uncomfortable?
Right.
And I was like, you don't have to judge it.
No.
Just say, hey, when you did this, or did you realize that it makes this happen? I was like, that's not a judgment.
No, it's just a
Right.
fact.
Yeah, it seems like you're questioning me a lot lately.
Right.
Is something going on?
Right, right. You see that a lot. Supervisors will, when they're giving feedback, they'll go to them and say, "You're lazy." Well, what does that mean? That's a
That's
judgment.
your opinion.
That's your opinion. That's a judgment
You're a bad
call.
boss.
Exactly.
Oh.
As opposed to you didn't come into work. You came into work late 3 times this week.
Yeah.
That's a behavior. That's something that's observable,
Right.
as opposed to your opinion, your judgment. Or the other one I hear about is, especially all the negative things that you are hearing about the younger and younger generations. They have no work ethic. Really? That's your opinion.
Right.
They have a work ethic. It might be just different than yours,
Yeah.
right? So instead, it needs to be focused on very behavioral types of statements, and your observations of their behavior.
Yeah. So when I think about all the things we've talked about, I know we started at the top talking about this boss versus buddy.
Mm.
And I really think that's one of the hardest things, especially if you come into your promotion from being a peer,
Mhm.
or doing the job that so well, right? And a lot of people, that's how they get into a supervisory
They do.
role.
They do.
And so boss versus buddy, and then this failure to give feedback for whatever reason, right? Because we're operating out of this. You were my friend,
Mhm.
right, for so
Mhm.
long. And so we don't give feedback, or we don't give good feedback. We don't give effective feedback. So we just talked about that. Be objective to the behavior. Don't judge it. You're not here to give your opinion about it. What did you see, right? Talk about what you saw. And then really thinking, am I doing something? Am I being indecisive? Right? Am I not having the conversation that I need to be having, or am I being too much of a micromanager? Right? Because that's the only place I'm comfortable, is doing the actual work.
Right.
And those of you that are still in the role, keep that in mind, that
Mhm.
your new supervisor, that's the only place she's comfortable.
That's right.
Is doing the job.
Yeah.
Cut her some slack, right? She doesn't know how to manage yet, but she knows how to be a teller, right?
Right.
So think about that. Then we talked about venting.
Yeah.
And
Got to get a new support system.
yeah. The other thing I want to talk about that can be a pitfall of new supervisors isn't just the venting, but it's, you've got to be consistent with your emotions.
Yeah.
You can't have a bad hair day.
You never do, Ray.
Oh, this humidity's killing me. But you don't get that luxury.
Yeah.
So you've really got to monitor your moods.
Mhm.
And if you feel like you're going to have a come apart, you need to step away. You
Yeah.
need to take a time out. You need to go to your car or whatever. Now, I'm not saying be a robot, but I'm saying you can't just like wig out on people one day and then, happy 1 minute, and you've got to check your emotional intelligence, and you've got to be better at that.
Yeah.
So that to me can be a pitfall, because if people are walking on eggshells around you, that's
Well,
not okay.
if that's the case, they're not going to come to you and say,
Uh-uh.
"Hey, I goofed up." They're not going to come to you
No.
and say, "Oh, we got this issue over here." They're going to avoid
Right.
those particular situations, which as a supervisor, I don't think you can avoid those, right?
Yep.
It's because you're ultimately
Yeah.
responsible.
Oh,
Some other things I would say is that the role of the supervisor is about getting work done through
Yep.
other people. It's not about you doing the work. Your job is about leading and management. It's not so much about doing the actual task.
yeah.
And along with that, I learned these things from you. If that's the case, then I'm also going to say that you need them a lot more than they need you, right?
Yeah.
As a supervisor, you need your employees a lot more than they need you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we talked about setting expectations, and not just on the technical stuff.
Right.
How are we going to play in the sandbox together? How are we going to treat one another? How are we going to fight?
Yeah. What's appropriate on our team?
Yeah. When to say when? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. What do we expect there? And most importantly, get to know your people, because you might say, well, my gosh, Dewey and I have worked together forever. But you know what? Now Dewey's my boss. So that dynamic has changed. And we need to kind of relearn each other in our new roles. And I think it's worth resetting.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why you and I meet one-on-one.
Yeah.
And I remember you coming to me one time and telling me, Dewey, you're goofing up, and you know what? It was one of the most helpful conversations I think I've ever had, because I was able to get feedback about me from you. So it's not just down, right? It can go back up the chain of command just as easily and be just as effective.
Yeah. But I couldn't have done that if you hadn't already established that trust bank account with me. Yeah. So, I have to give you credit for that. And you didn't flip out on me.
No.
You sat there calmly, but that's you being a good boss.
Well,
right?
I needed to hear that at that time,
Yeah.
So, but it's because we've developed such a good working relationship. Right. We have both. I hope that I've put a lot of deposits into your account, and I know that you've put a lot in mine. So, but that's what makes it good. That's why we can come to one another and tell each other how we really feel about things. Yeah.
Invest
Absolutely.
in your people. Trust me, people first.
Brianna, got any other final questions?
Yes. So I've already fallen into some of the relationship pitfalls. Strategies for turning it around. I need a do-over.
Yeah.
Well, and I think you answered your own question, right? A do-over.
Yeah.
So maybe going to that person, sitting down with them, buying them a cup of coffee and say, look, where are we at with this? And let's start over. Let's learn about each other. Let's earn each other's trust, and start with that do-over.
Absolutely. Just call a timeout, and just say, I feel that this is not where it should be, and I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I need you, and I need to know what I need to do to reestablish this relationship.
Yeah.
Help me.
Yeah. Let's help each other.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I know that sounds easy, but your heart will be pounding, and I've done it. I have done it.
It's difficult. These are difficult conversations to have. There's no doubt about it. They're uncomfortable for people. If you're not skilled at it, then you feel even more uncomfortable with it. Just remember, as a supervisor, it's not necessarily that you have to have all the answers, right? You invite them to bring the answers and work together towards a solution. But the more that you ignore it, the more that you avoid it, the worse it gets.
Yes.
So it is really about just sitting down with people and having some difficult conversations once in a while.
One thing that just occurred to me, we focus so much on the employees that are always outside the lines, don't forget your really great rock star employees.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that can be a pitfall.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the ones that are doing it every single day, you can count on them. They're your steady eddies.
I've got 2 of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to be having stay conversations with them.
Absolutely.
Don't ignore them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One other thing I would say too
That's a
is
pitfall.
don't overload them.
Yeah.
I mean, oftentimes, you've got.
That's how we reward them, do we?
Yeah, we give them more work to do. And often we take work away from other employees that are
Yes.
not such rock star employees, thereby rewarding them for
Mhm.
bad choices, poor performance, or bad choices in behavior. And we give it to our rock stars because we know we can trust them to do that.
Yeah.
So let me get this straight. You're actually rewarding poor performance, right? And you're actually punishing good performance. After a while, that rock star is going to think to themselves, why should I be the rock star?
Right.
When all I get is more work to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So don't ignore your rock stars for sure.
Yeah.
But
Well,
have a conversation.
Yeah.
That's always the first thing.
First thing, have a conversation with
Yep.
people.
Yeah. Anything else, Brianna?
No other questions at this time.
All right, we've got our QR code up there, so you can scan that with your phone. We'd love to see you at our next supervisory series. I will tell you this, registration for that ends on Monday, August 2nd, and that will be in person, live and in person. It starts August 17th. If you still want to do things virtually, we do have one coming up in September. So as soon as registration for our in-person SOUP series, supervisory series, we call it SOUP series, as soon as that ends on August 2nd, we will open registration for our virtual series. So check us out there. We'll be online, live online in September, but we'd love to see you at one of those 2 events. We're so glad that you could join us this morning. If you have any other questions, of course, you can check us out at our Facebook page, or you can email us, mti@missouri.edu. Thanks again.
And thanks for letting me play today.
Yes.
I appreciate it. Yeah,
All
it's
right.
been fun.
Go be great.